Well, welcome everyone. My name is Namulan Bayar-Sehan. I am the Education Director at the Aldridge Contemporary Art Museum. The museum is located on the ancestral homelands of the Wappinger and Munsee Lenape peoples, today known as Ridgefield, Connecticut. The Aldridge is a non-collecting institution and presents exhibitions by emerging, established, and group shows based on themes throughout the year. This evening, we will be using the Zoom functions of Q&A and chat for any questions, so please put any questions in throughout the talk. I'm really delighted to introduce Milano Chow and Nikholis Planck this evening, as they will talk to each other about all their influences and shared experiences. Milano Chow was born in 1987 in Los Angeles, California, where she currently lives and works. She was included in the 2019 Whitney Biennial at the Whitney Museum of American Art and is a recipient of a Pollock-Krasner Foundation Grant. Her solo exhibitions include Bel Ami in Los Angeles, Adams and Ollman in Portland, and Chapter New York, to name a few. Her current exhibition at the Aldridge, Milano Chow Prima Facie, is on view through May 15th, 2022. Nikholis Planck was born in 1987 in Virginia and is based in New York City. His work includes painting, drawing, sculpture, publications, and performance. His orchestrated events are often concerned with breaking down formal boundaries and infused with a general suspicion of contemporary art. Through sustained idiosyncratic investigations, including traditional animation and imagined set design, observational drawing continues to be the root of his work. He has participated in solo and group exhibitions at commercial and non-commercial spaces, including Magenta Plains, New York, 14A Hamburg, Greenwood Cemetery, Brooklyn, and many more. Welcome to you both. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for hosting and for the great introduction.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to be here on account of Milano and to share with everyone. So yeah, indeed. Thank you, Naimlan, so much.
Yeah, thank you again. So we'll just dive right in. We prepared a slideshow and a very loose script or list of topics to cover, and we'll just dive right in. And yeah, I think our goal was to just have a very natural friend-to-friend conversation. So this first slide, these are images of one of Nick's publications that I printed through this platform called Oso Press, which I started in 2011, around the time that I moved back to LA from New York. And it was a very DIY, I guess I feel mixed about the term zine, but yeah, like DIY publications. Usually I collaborate with one artist at a time on a project. So this was Nick's. And the image you see on the left is the cover. The title was called Fanfare. There's a photo of a spread on the right, and then on the bottom right, that is like a PDF of one of the spreads in the publication too. And yeah, it was like, I guess I would describe it as like a mix of Nick's drawings, like the style that I associated with him when we first met, which was like very representative drawing, a lot of figurative work, some drawn from life, some drawn from photos, some imagination. And he incorporated a lot of text into the work too. So here they're kind of like pins you'd have on a jacket. And then I just like the mix of the picture in a picture and the text within those drawings. And all the lettering I also really love. And should we talk about how we met? I'm trying to think. I'm trying to even trace it. It was so long ago, like over 10 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely recall cold calling / emailing you because I found your work through like non-contemporary art channels, like through some drawings you had done for a clothing company that I saw in an issue of Teen Vogue that I randomly picked up at a 7-Eleven like I think it must have been 2008 or 9 maybe, and then I eventually found you online, because back then it was like kind of more difficult to like from kind of jumping from one medium to another medium, you know, and then
And it's
yeah.
like pre-social media internet, which is
Yeah,
like need to
absolutely.
be not. I don't think we're being nostalgic about it, but to like make that differentiation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's really important. Yeah, and I think it's like through media, like printed, like literally printed media, that like these things where like you would find something really cool, like like a literally like a half-inch column and maybe a magazine that would unlock like so many doorways. And that was also when the internet felt even more like you could have like a website and it would be like kind of like it could be like everything to like when you project it out. And like, you know, for instance, like the Oso, it was kind of like, to me, from where I was at the time, like a little bit after, maybe a couple years after high school, and like it was just like, to me, feel like so many doors that you know, that was like such a door opener, being like seeing all these different artists who I never knew, and also just this other hierarchy of creative outlet, and also just like zines in general. I think, you know, that was like what I thought the art world was like people making artist scenes and trading them and stuff. So yeah, so then I found you through that, and I think I just had maybe reached out via email, and then we kind of started like a sort of a back and forth for a long time. And then yeah, I mean, it's weird. I mean, literally it was like happen chance, really weird. Like I don't know how else I would have found, I mean, I think eventually I would have found the publishing things you were doing at the time, but like it was really kind of crazy. Like when I think about it, like I was thinking about it today actually, and I was like, whoa, like, you know, your drawings, it was like cool to be like, you see someone's drawings, then you see them, where now I think it's more like you see the person, then you see their work, you know, because of social media and stuff. So
Yeah, or like now I think there's the language of like self-branding or something for artists is way more.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah, totally. Way
Back
more
then
of
it
a
was
thing.
very sloppy, and I don't know.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's one thing too. I think even back then, like what you were doing, publishing other people's work, was kind of like was pretty modest. It felt, I guess, because it was naturally a modest and open project, that kind of what made me feel so attracted to it, and was like, I want to be a part of this basically, and like meet this person and meet these people and etc. And then on top of that, your work, which the moment I saw like these early drawings, which I think were kind of these drawings of people.
What's in
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh my God. Oh wait, there we go. And then these are two other spreads from the same publication, Fanfare.
Yeah, and then yeah, so like seeing, like it was like seeing your personal work and then seeing like the work you all, so it's weird, like I knew you by your personal work, then saw the publishing, and I think that was how it was like, you can only find Milano through the self-publishing stuff that you're doing. So it was kind of fun to have to parse out everything, like who's Milano, the publishing part, etc. And like also just seeing your like, from the moment I saw your work, I was like, whoa, this is amazing. Like I guess I'd never seen anything like it. Like, you know, it felt like very like next to me, I guess, you know, as opposed to like a book of drawing that was even of contemporary art or something. So that was always kind of important. And again, the internet, like at that time, was a lot more like, it seemed so much more like open kind of. So and this drawing is like such a great example of your work, of your earlier work. And just thinking about how your work is, you've always had this consistency in your work. And I was thinking today on the way home to do this, I was like, oh yeah, like it's funny, like you aren't ahead of your time, because I feel like now people, this kind of work is a lot more, people are not so afraid to show, you know, figurative works depicting representational work, human figures, etc. But like you were sort of doing that so early on at a time when that wasn't really like there wasn't that much of a difference, I guess, abstraction or representation, not so. Now you're making work that kind of is less about the figure in a certain way compared to this work, which I feel like is very much about the figure, but also it's almost like these are the interior of your exteriors. I kind of was thinking about in a way. So seeing this, like these figures that were in these rooms, but also with the same technical virtuosity that you have, you know, like such like care to every like aspect of every like frame, or from one side to the other. So it's really cool.
Funny
Yeah.
like that, both have work in this slideshow that's like 10 years old or
Yeah.
older. It's very, very jarring. And then actually I wanted to point out, like, Nick, you actually own this piece. Like, we did a art trade a long time ago.
Yeah, totally. Which was crazy because I feel like I got that I think it had to have been 2009 or mid or like before summer 2010 when you sent me this, because I remember I got it and was like, holy shit, like this is so wild. It was like a frame drawing and it was like this drawing. I was just like, I was so, I mean, your work has to be seen in person regardless of the time period, you know? So it's like a fantastic, I have it hanging on in our wall in our like in our bedroom, and it's just like such a, like the mouse part, you know, and there's so much about it. Like it's such a great drawing, and your work at the time, I
And
know,
there's
just
a
so much.
mechanical pencil too, which
Oh
is,
wow, that's amazing. Oh my god, I love that. The click, like kind of click or something, you know.
yeah. And it does feel like a very young version of art where like you get really obsessive about detail and you don't quite edit yet or know how to do it. So you're just like, I have to, you know, show off all the like make the labor very visible in the artwork, and it's like every
Yeah.
pencil stroke.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. That's funny you say that, because like even like in the vase, there's like this, the vase has like the flower motif, but then like the side table is like completely rendered in this way that it's sort of like funny to see the amount of the detail, the attention, the amount of attention on each kind of section. Yeah, so I feel like it just shows I mean, you're obviously a disciplined drafts person, so I think that that's one recurring sort of aspect of your work, you know, that's really exciting to see. And a lot of people, you know, change and shift a lot, right, as an artist, and I feel like you have done that, but within your sort of a very like kind of disciplined set of tools and procedures, you have really stuck to it, and it's really changed a lot. You know, obviously you can do a lot with, you know, very little, and I feel like you clearly prove that, you know, and I think that's probably why people, you know, enjoy your work now, especially because all that kind of work is evident in it, I think, you know, and I think anyone who hasn't seen your work from before, maybe the past 4 years, should really scrub the internet just to see what, you know, where have you gotten to now. I think it's really
And
important.
I don't want people to look at my old work.
Yeah, no, which I told, yeah.
Every new show. But yeah, I thought that was also like specifically why I wanted to invite you as the other speaker, just because you've known the work for a long time, and you also just have that knowledge of drawing specifically as a medium. And like, I don't know, I feel like you maybe I sometimes struggle like having to distinguish that from painting, or maybe it's like a chip on my shoulder. It's like a very strange, it's almost like a medium that exists by process of elimination of like what other media doesn't do. So
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's such a good point, because there is like drawing is underneath like a lot of these other sort of like sculpture or painting for that matter. And I think that drawing, I think you're a good example of it. Your work is like this, drawing is sort of like can be both, drawing can be like can be within contemporary art, but it can also exist complete outside of it and have nothing to do with it.
yeah,
And
like mechanical drawing or some utilitarian use.
yeah, absolutely. And then even like from like children's drawing to like, you know, drawing that was not even meant for an audience, you know, and whereas I think painting, maybe not exactly, but like sculpture and like other work in a certain kind of new media, like kind of needs contemporary art or the label of contemporary art or the realm of contemporary art to sort of exist. Whereas drawing historically has always just been like alongside like history in a way, like from like the beginning. So I think that like, and again, like I said, like this kind of discipline you have, like despite your frustration of drawing, it's like of its place within like all these kind of set boundaries and hierarchies of art, you're like have stuck with it in a way that is really admirable. And you know, I think that's kind of what makes your work so interesting, and why I've always like loved it, just to see like the drawing, you know, because drawing can be like it's so expansive, you know, like, and I think your work literally does that. Like you go through the window, like these facades, or like in the room with a young person, the mouse on their shoulder, and you know, and I think evidently people always really feel for drawing. Like you can be at a museum and people like love, I think end up like going really into the drawing piece. It's like kind of like, it's like you can capture it, you can almost hold it, and that seems more universal than like a sculpture perhaps that's like beyond weight, you know, that's so heavy or something, I think so.
Yeah, or maybe the mode of production is more accessible or people can imagine it.
Yeah, yeah. Like for instance, that Joseph Joachim show we went to when you were here. It's like that. I think like you know they described Joseph as being someone who worked, you know, worked his entire life at some sort of job, and then did these drawings outside of whatever his occupation was to make money. And it's kind of like proves you don't really need like a like maybe like also drawing. You know, you don't necessarily need the same reception like historically and sort of you know, conceptually drawing doesn't need the same kind of like audience the way like sculpture does maybe, or even painting, you know, it's like drawing is such like an insular activity and a creative expression you can do. And you don't need so much like, you know,
Like
what's the word?
sports or I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Totally.
Have to stick in like this highbrow realm.
Yeah, exactly. That's perfect. And like Joseph Joachim, I think, ironically influenced so many people in Chicago, right? The Chicago Imagists, right, in a way. And it's kind of like, while he lived probably such a simple life, I'm sure he deserves so much more, you know, for what he did and stuff. And I guess is getting it now, but it is kind of like that where it's yeah, I mean, I think it makes it, like you said, it makes it people able to access it because the materials of it alone are like, oh, like you literally have those in your house. People have them in their house, or they're like, you could find them anywhere. So
I wish I included a slide of his work, but yeah, for those in the audience who aren't familiar, I think the show's still up. It was a show we saw at MoMA in New York, a solo show by Joseph Joachim, who was self-taught and he like started drawing in his 70s. And he's most well known for these landscapes that are drawn from memory. So they have like very specific, he like came up with this almost like visual code for like how to represent like trees and mountains, and they have like very strange perspectives and line work. And sometimes he would like redraw the same scene over and over again, which was like one of my favorite parts of the show. And he used like really cheap paper, like it's all yellowing and it's all about like the size of like 9x12, very cheap, like thin paper, which I don't know. I also kind of like, because
yeah,
my grudges when I see artwork is sometimes when the production is too slick, and like sometimes that's part of the concept of the work, but I don't know, I'm always just very attached to things made by hand where you like see flaws and
yeah.
you know imperfections.
Yeah, and he like drew with all these. He like used a ballpoint pen a lot, which was like
Yeah.
really endearing, and like the way it would bleed eventually, like over time, and like just like sort of using the materials at hand. And
Yeah.
yeah, totally. I also want to say like it's funny, like he used all this kind of discarded paper and this found paper, and it's kind of like there's something about like that as a choice of to draw on. And I feel like funny enough, like those first slides you showed of this like zine you published of mine, it's like a lot of the drawings I'd done were like on found paper or discarded old paper, because there to me there was some sort of like importance to that, I guess, or because it was like sort of reacting against like a nice piece of paper or like whatever, like a Bristol board or something, you know. Somehow that's so kind of alienating, I guess, you know. Not to say it's not, you know, it's fine people use that, but there is a disconnect when I feel like you're like, you know, I think there's the material seems more expensive than what is being done or something onto it or whatever, you know.
Yeah, or like you're trying to impose like a value on the work by like just using more expensive material.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally. Whereas Joseph Joachim was like literally making like an insane drawing with ballpoint pen on like a teared sheet with like rounded edges, and you're like, whoa, like
it's like falling apart. Yeah.
yeah, totally. It's amazing.
So okay, I'll keep flipping. This work is
Yeah.
maybe like 2011, 2012 when I was drawing again in LA. Yeah, I didn't have a studio like the first year or two when I was back here. So and like also like drawing is really practical in that way where it's like a very mobile medium. And like if I showed you a photo of my studio, it's a really simple setup. Like I can kind of work anywhere as long as there's like a table and a clean wall. And so yeah, this is from that early time period in LA. It's just drawing a lot of windows and like architectural features like doors, because it was like a ready-made compositional device. So I would just like draw the window frame and then like stick a scene in there. And then what's the next slide? Oh yeah, and then this is like a publication I drew for Jesse Halibo's old platform called
School children.
Yes, and like this was like an oversized, it was like 15 inches or something tall, so it had this like very awkward, I don't know, scale when you like held it in your hands. But there are also line drawings like this, which is like very different from work that I typically show in public. But it was kind of just about figuring out like little iconographies and like motifs that I really like staircases and windows and shoes. Oh, and then, yeah, I thought this was a good slide to show in contrast with that older work of the larger window, and just kind of, it's like almost hopefully in your imagination, you can like think of all the artistic steps that led from that work to this work. So, I mean, like, yeah, like the work's always been pencil drawings. I've always shown in black and white, although like I'm hopefully going to try to experiment more with color and bring that into the work, but I don't want to talk too much about that. And then, but yeah, I think maybe the biggest change is just that the drawing surface is just becoming more dense with detail. It's just like, you know, like drawing's all about practicing your hand and like building that skill over time. So I think just having a little better control over the medium. Next slide. Oh yeah, and this is this is a close-up of one of the works made for the Aldrich show. And I did like this series of these vertical building facades, and all of the windows and are cut out and they have scenes collage from the back. And later in this slideshow, I'll have some progress pictures of a similar work. So it's a little more evident about how they're made.
And again, it's so important. Like I think most good art and drawing, especially, like you get to see it in person because you actually can't really tell. I mean, the cutouts you can kind of tell, but there's really something that makes them like so much less like flat when you see them in person, because just like that cutout is like such like enough to push it back a little more and then be like, whoa, what is that kind of, you know, there's like weird voids or something in a way that kind of even adds to like the way you render like the relief of like the columns, but then you have this cutout, so it's kind of nice when you even just like a simple like kind of breakthrough like that, you know what I mean? I think that's really important. That's like such a big change in your work. That was like this shift or whatever, I think so.
It's just a very small gesture that hopefully does a lot. Yeah, and I was wondering if you have like conflict with how work is photographed versus how it's experienced in person.
Yeah, absolutely, totally. I mean, I feel like that's always a thing. I feel like my painting is essentially like unviewable on digital images. And I think even the drawing too, because of the paper, the variety of like weird coated paper. But I always feel like, you know, with painting, it's sort of like my painting, it always gets flattened or you just can't tell. It's like this wax surface. So
yeah,
I feel like that's the thing. And even with the drawing, there's like all this stuff you can't, like a newsprint drawing is really beautiful in person because like the paper has this weird texture that's barely there, but with a scanner or even like a photo, it kind of doesn't get it so much. But you know, it's weird with your drawings. It's like almost like a whole other experience to see it digitally, I feel like, you know what I mean?
Still, and yeah, I just feel like also the tricky thing with black and white is that when you like minimize things digitally, it just gets really smushy and like
yeah, totally.
It has to look like a gray blob, and I don't know.
Yeah, because there's like a lot of sharp edges in this work, you know, like I feel like even though there's this grayness, like a lot of this like different values of the gray and the black, there's actually like such like precise like vertical lines and vertical shading, you know what I mean? And the black and white does kind of get condensed, you know what I mean? I think, like you said, I really agree with that. It's technology just can't keep up with, again, the handmade or whatever, which is
make peace with it. Like, okay, as long as I know.
Yeah, exactly.
And then this was just, I just thought like I use a lot of like fashion photos for the collage. Like all of the figures in the work are collage. They're not hand drawn. So this is an example of like maybe a photo I would choose just because she's like perfectly framed by the window, and that's like a reoccurring motif that I use in the work. So yeah.
Which is also an interesting point too, is like the work that I think, let's say someone like me who's following from like 12 or 10 years ago, it's like these rendered figures and people And then like this sort of like I think you're using like some kind of transfer for like, or like
Yeah.
transfer for the figure. So that's kind of cool because you're like, okay, like again, like you said, like the deal you make with yourself, okay, I know that it looks like this, but then you're like, the deal is like you, and I think we talked about this, like this sort of like discipline where you're like, I have to render everything, or I have to draw everything, no matter what it is. And then you kind of like almost liberated yourself where you're like, okay, I can like collage in the bodies, but then everything else is like so hyper, worked on and detailed. So it's kind of cool, that kind of weird balance. I think personally for you, like maybe an audience, it's like, oh, whatever, it's like collage drawing. But like, I think as an artist, that's like a big deal to like let yourself do that, because you could be stuck trying to figure out how to draw something and be like, oh, I could just do something totally different, but not allow yourself to. And I feel like that's a hard thing to do as an artist, to move forward and to continue to make work.
Yeah, or it's funny because now I feel kind of stuck in this mode where I just like draw this elaborate architectural background and then I put in the figure. Like, not that it's like that formulaic or that simple, but yeah, I don't know. Still thinking, or like still questioning, like, why not hand render the figures too? Because you can have more control and you can yeah, like because sometimes I'm stuck where I like want a specific pose, but it only depends on like the images that are available and accessible to me. And so I don't know, I guess it's just a ongoing question.
Yeah.
And then these are two David Hockney drawings because it's like, I think we're both really huge fans of this specific body of work of his from the 70s, where he just did like not line drawings, but live studies of friends, and they just have like a certain life to them that some of his other work doesn't have. And yeah, I think he mostly used like color pencil and ink for all of them.
Yeah, these might have even been, I don't know, I think the one on the right here, the more colorful drawing, might have been at the Met a couple of years ago for his like retrospective. And it's funny because like I feel like some people would look at these and be like, this looks like some ridiculous 70s illustration, but I feel like it's so, like when I see it's like I'm getting like chills looking at this, like
it's so beautiful.
Yeah, there's something so light, and I guess it is like, it's like whatever, some sort of like conservative viewpoint, which I don't really think that, but like from life, it's like so varied. Like I don't know, there's something uncanny about the way the hand, just about the way he captured her eyes, and but then at the same time, it's so like stylized is maybe the right word, but there's like this weird kind of like, he like what he doesn't draw is really there as well too, and this looks really contemporary. Like I don't know, like this is timeless, I feel like. And this is how I feel about your all of your work, but in the work of like the figurative work from years ago that you were doing, I feel like there's a similar thing where it's like, whoa, it's like there's just something about like the person, like the person's face, the care to it. I don't know, there's just something there that's really electrifying. I had a discussion today with my coworkers about Elizabeth Payton, and there's a similar thing where you're like, whoa, it's just like something, like it's so like, if you just like fall in love with it, you're seduced by it in a way. But there's something, I don't know, I could talk about these all day, it's crazy. And I think it also, like kind of like what we were talking about with using the photo, like the sort of collage figurative elements, you're like, you're sort of like boxed in by what you find. And I feel like similarly, David Hockney was drawing from life a lot at this moment in his career, and I feel like he was like, well, I'm going to draw what's right here in front of me, these people in front of me. And that was like where his life was. He's probably more socializing, etc. And I feel like that's kind of similar when you're like drawing, you're like, I'm going to draw this, my friend. It's like that's what you're working with. So then from there, there's so much to kind of go into it, but it's also constricting. And I kind of like that. Like I'm looking at like her pants right on the right side, and I never realized how like they're just like billowing, like they're like pleated, and it's like, oh, it's just like so beautiful. I don't know, it's fantastic.
It's just really precise. And yeah, I also wanted to include these just to talk about like the difference between drawing from life and drawing from reference, because I mostly draw from photos. And like, yeah, just because of the subject matter, which are like buildings, I'm not gonna like sit out art paper outside and like draw. It just doesn't make any sense. But
no, totally. I think that's a good point though, because it's true. But I think like, like you're totally using these sources, right? There's like, you can draw from a source, you can draw from photos, you can draw from life. And I think that critically, I think a lot of times artists nowadays, of course, draw from life, but like there's a lot of like kind of reliance on like photography in a certain way, and some people can make that work.
And I don't know why, but somehow it is like very evident when you look at paintings, you can just kind of tell when it's drawn from a digital photo, maybe because of the way digital photos kind of have like a convention of how they're cropped or lit or something that comes through in the painting. And then what else was I going to say? Oh yeah, when I was like in high school and they like taught us drawing and painting, it was like very taboo to draw from photos. Like you were very discouraged. I forgot why. It was like maybe a generation gap, something where maybe it's this idea that you'll lose detail, or maybe the photo's doing more of the compositional work for you and limiting your artistry. But I feel
you're
like
not seeing it or something. You're not seeing the subject matter.
Maybe that's it. Yeah. We're like drawing a representation as opposed to the real thing. But I feel like now there's no rules that, or like nobody really has a debate.
Yeah, totally. I think there's so many fantastic people who make drawings from photos, and it doesn't really matter, right? So, but
I feel like it's always about like what method works for you too.
Yeah, and like also like some people. I think it's also the idea of like some people can paint really well, but they can't draw maybe as well, and vice versa. And I feel like some people like work from photos very well, and that's a generational thing, perhaps, or part of like a way whatever you're brought up on media, what kind of media you're brought up as a child or whatever. And of course, David Hockney probably also, no doubt, drew from all types of sources too, eventually and stuff. So, but somehow like this was like some return to some sort of like weird neoclassic thing, or Ing, that artist Dominique Ing or whatever.
Oh yeah, or maybe just like a portrait sitting, which is like
And there's something radical. It's almost like there's drawing, there's contemporary drawing, there's drawing, like I was saying earlier, and then there's like there's like photography, then there's like portrait photography, and like but then there's like drawing portraits, which I feel like that's its own realm where you're like, I don't know, it's just sort of like a different sort of zone to talk about things and like to express oneself, etc., and like different results, I think,
Yeah, and I think they all have like different value systems.
Definitely.
And, oh yeah, now these are yours. These are from your Greenwood Cemetery observational drawings.
Yeah, this one is from, this is like from like I live near Greenwood Cemetery. It's like this large cemetery in Brooklyn, and it's become sort of like somewhat like a muse and a meeting point for a couple of friends of mine. And my good friend David Armakos like kind of got me into coming and drawing. We'd have these like sessions, which we were doing before the pandemic and then throughout the pandemic into now. And it was just a great way to sort of expand upon like subject matter and also augmenting things. And like, this is like some sort of viewpoint behind like some mausoleum on a hill. But then I think I was like, oh, it kind of looks like a weird like set design as well somehow. So it's sort of like, I'm able to get off in a lot of ways. Like it's like there's this like observational aspect to it, and then there's like this weird man-made sort of design into it, and then also the sort of like nature, etc. I think this is like from 2018 or 19, and it's like these wax color pencils I use on like a coated stock, and so and I probably did this like standing up with a clipboard or something, you know what I mean? So, but I look at this and I'm like, oh yeah, like I don't think I can't really draw. I can draw from photograph, I guess, but like I can't really get like the way the shadow looks with that like concrete book or something, So that's kind of important to me, I guess, in a way. Like it's like if I move too much to the left, I lose it when you're drawing from life. So I kind of like that there's like this very weird like moment of concentration, and then I mean this like looks nothing like it probably, but it's like I have all the tools there, and I can kind of.
And you would do these in like one sittings per drawing?
Yeah, this would be like one session, one sitting, and then I go home and just like look at it, or maybe fill in something. But this one was definitely like one like continuous kind of drawing, and which is hard for me to do in a way, like to work on like drawing for a long time, I guess.
Exhaust your eyes, I think, sometimes to like look at one thing for a long time.
Yeah, totally. And like in life, like from life, you can kind of pick. I can pick and choose what I want. So in that way, it's sort of like this weird, like, I feel like I've always done it my whole life, like just like picking out what I think looks cool and like kind of fucking with it and messing it up, and then like, okay, leaving some things as is, and then I'm like again like stopping at the right moment, I think is a thing too. So
yeah, no, I like the balance between the negative space and then all the hand rendering in this artwork.
Yeah.
There's something very like romantic, like capital R, like a ruin in nature or something.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's really funny. Totally. Yeah. Yeah, and it's also kind of like diaristic.
Yeah, it's really lovely. Yeah. And I like the yellow. I feel like the paper works really well because it kind of has a history to itself, and then drawing on top of it.
And these, I think, like this, one of them is like a straightforward newsprint. This is supposed to be kind of like a panorama. So I think this is one
Wow.
thing I looked at, and then I mean, it's very loosely a panorama, but like it's me sitting down looking at this sort of kind of like hilltop that goes down. And then I think it's like on newsprint, and then like, because oftentimes I'm like piecing the drawing together because my drawing board is like small. And I think that the three drawings in the right are actually backs of like old drawing catalogs or something. That's kind of the old glossy paper. So it's kind of like my arsenal of paper is like always like found weird glossy, which I don't know. It's like so dorky. Like I mean, found paper, but it's somehow like I can kind of, I don't feel so like precious about it. And then it's like, oh yeah, so I can kind of connect the paper, and it has all this weird coloring onto it, and like, so I'm not afraid to like mess up. And I usually, when I'm not afraid, I make the best work. I feel like when I'm not afraid.
Yeah.
To mess up, you know?
Kind of like I can't ever work in like a beautiful sketchbook because it's
Yes.
too nice. And like,
Yeah, totally.
Just get too self-conscious. And
Yeah, which reminds me, like when I went to your, I think probably your first studio in LA in 2013, early 2013, I think. You had this really interesting studio that was like a weird V shape kind of.
Very
like,
weird, yeah. Like a building that was like falling apart, and it would leak whenever it rained, and was like had like an illegal electricity setup. It was
and
like
you shared it with another person.
yeah, I
And
had
then,
like 2 or 3 studio mates cycle through.
and I remember we like went through, like you had like, I can't totally, I wish I had photos, but like I think you had like, because we're talking about like paper, like, you know, as opposed to a sketchbook, like you had like piles of like kind of newsprint, maybe
Yeah.
like these drawings, you know, and I kind of think about that, like you were like able to work out a lot of things with like this paper that was more or less like valueless or newsprint, or, you know, but then it was like you were able to conjure and work out all these things that eventually got to where you are now. But it's again, it's like, yeah, like I mean, they're masterpieces. Like I wish everyone could see like this other side of how you work, but like again, it's like you're not really nervous about like how precious the paper is or whatever, you know, things like that. Or even like the sketchbook where you're like, I can't tear it out, or I have to tear it out, or the binding is really nice, you know, it's like such a
It's not, I kind of just sketch on scraps, and then I don't really do fully finished sketches where like you kind of just scale it up into the final work. It'll maybe be like just a way to figure out the shape of something. And then, usually I just have loose scraps. And then I've been doing a new thing where like for every show, I just collect all the scraps that were made leading up to the final pieces. And then I just like staple them together into like a very loose book.
That's awesome. Well, of course, you can't escape that book, like the idea of, and this is drawing too. I think it's like drawing always looks good in a book, right? I think, you know, flat. So, and like with all the publishing, like literal publishing that you did by hand, you know, it's like you're almost like, oh yeah, it's the best way to organize something is the book, right? Even if you just squash it, like, you know, it's just like that's like all there, and you can go back into it, you know. Which this is perfect. Next slide, if I can go on, talk about like you cutting like self-publishing, like with a small printer at home, and then cutting everything. It's like I was thinking a lot about these works the past couple of weeks for this talk, because these like kind of mock-ups or these mock-ettes or something, maybe, I don't know how you exactly would call them.
We're still figuring out the terms. Like they're either called pop-ups or like be like books in quotes, since like I guess I should just describe it as if someone is seeing this for the first time, but this is one of 2 of these like 3-dimensional works in the show that were shown in the screening room. There was like, there's an installation photo later on in the slideshow, but it's a room without windows, and we hung one drawing on one wall, and then there are these 2 3-dimensional works on individual pedestals. And I've been making similar structured like drawings since 2019, and I have the first one I ever made also in this later in this slideshow. But basically, it's like the original drawing is like an L shape, which you can then fold into these 2 walls and the floor. So that's all one single piece. And then the door that you see on the right, that's like a separate piece of paper that is like scored and cut so that it can be an open door, freestanding. And then yeah, I'll sometimes on the left, like there's an open door. And so I collaged in a background. So there's like 2 layers of paper there. I think that's like the best way to describe how it's constructed. And then in theory, like you could flatten it all up and like fold it into like a little book and it would be like hidden away. So it's like this creation of this intimate space that's hidden, like that reveals itself when you open it up. And yeah, I was inspired by like doll houses and miniatures and architectural models and movie sets and I don't know, or like thinking of like movie sound stages where it's just like the front of a saloon and it's really just like a wooden board that's painted and you like walk around and it's like there's nothing behind it. Yeah, so trying to bring up that, trying to evoke that construction and like artifice and surface and yeah.
Yeah, and like the door, like the doorways are there's 3 doorways, but like they're all separate. So like the one like on the 2 walls are like they're cut out and then they're pasted on, they're collage on, right?
No, those 2 are just
Those
like
ones are drawn on.
straight onto the paper. Yeah. And then the one on your visual right is like a separate piece, but they all have the same patterning. So there's like a mirror effect. Like it's kind of like, I wish I had like a fancy 3D model or something, but like stand just in this viewpoint, like behind the open door, you kind of get this cool like mirroring effect with the other door in the background. But I guess you'll just have to see the show in person.
Absolutely, definitely. Oh yeah.
This is this other piece in the show, and yeah, similar construction. The scale's a slightly bit smaller, and yeah, and I got really obsessed with like elaborate floor tiles because they provided like a visual pattern. And also there's like a tradition, and if you look at like Renaissance painting, they use like tiles to create the perspective a lot. It's just like a very quick visual trick. What else? I like the contrast between like the geometric pattern and then these like more finely rendered parts.
But the screens alone, like this one, there's another one too, I think in the slideshow, and it has like these Asian style, or like I guess Asian screens.
Yeah,
and
it's like Japanese screens. Kind of,
yeah,
you see a similar design on it where it would be like cranes are very popular, and also it's the I guess image treatment is a little different. Like there, I would do like the kind of like tonal rubbing to make the gray, and then I use like an eraser to draw with like drawing negatively. If that's the term. To make
and that's cool because that's like all these different I mean, there's a uniform aspect to it all, but like the screen, like in this, for instance, the screen, it's like a whole other kind of way for you to be like, I'm gonna indulge in some kind of other interest or other reference you bring in, you know. And like you're hand drawing it, which again, you're like kind of processing it again somehow, which is interesting, I think, as well.
Especially because like the parameters are like black and white drawing. So like what kind of range can you offer within that? And then again here, like the figure is the photo transfer. And I can explain, like the process is really simple. They're just laser prints on plastic transparency. And then you can just do a rubbing onto any piece of paper, and it doesn't involve tone like solvents, so it just has this nice matte quality that is a little more seamless with the drawing. Yeah. Okay, next one. Oh yeah, so this is like the first one of those that I ever made, and this one was just done. The previous 2 you saw are like mounted to bookboard and book cloth, so it evokes a book way more, and it's also just like sturdier in terms of structure. And this one just had like book cloth around it, so you can see like it's a little wobbly. But this was originally made for a show in 2019, this group show in an apartment. So I really love the installation photos, and I would like to make some where the lighting is more intentional. Like I just like this lamp next to the piece because it messes with the scale. And this is like a clean photo of the first one I ever did. So you can see all of the same elements, like the paired doors, the folding screen, the figure that's freestanding, the tiled floor. Then yeah, this is like the first 3D P or 3D. Yeah, I still like have, I feel like I don't know how to describe or word would appropriately describe them, but this was like the first 3D piece I showed, and I think it was in 2017 for.
What's the chapter?
Yeah, was it Free's New York booth with Chapter, and yeah, I was just feeling stuck because I kept showing drawings like framed in on the wall, and just felt like stuck in that convention. Like there's only so many hangings you can do. There's so many installation interventions you can do with like hanging frame drawings on a wall. So yeah, I thought like, how can you show something more freestanding and also escape the frame? Because I mean, you can even see it in this photo where like it just reflects so much light and really obscures the drawing underneath. So yeah, I like that it freed it from the frame and from the plexiglass, and that you could get like really close to the surface. And also that it evoked like an architectural model much more closely, since it was like also a freestanding structure. So this is just like a horizontal facade of a building. And then it's like the structure is an accordion book. So technically you could also like close this, and then you have like two hardcovers. And this is just one-sided. The other side is completely blank. And then now switching over to like another series, I've been doing these elevation drawings for a while. And this one is intended to be like two rooms that like share a door, like the door that you see slightly to the left in the middle two rooms are as if they're like two sides of the same door. So the top is like a living room and the bottom is a bathroom. And they're based on these, the next two slides will show, but they reference these traditional architectural drawings, like kind of like a pre-digital age, like the way an architect would show a client like a potential room was that they would draw like the 4 elevations, meaning just like the frontal view of a wall. In this arrangement, and then in the middle they would do either the ceiling design or the floor design. And I just like this, really, it's just like very disorienting. I like that it's like a perspective you can never have in real life, and that it also requires some work from the viewer for them to like, you know, kind of visualize the walls coming up and like put together in their head like this room coming together. It's just like I thought it was just like a really interesting way to represent space. And then in the bottom right, it's like a fake key. Like you'll see that in like archaeological photos sometimes, like they just have like a little scale, but that one's a fake one, but I just like.
Yeah, this checkerboard motif. Yeah. Even like the gray rubbing, like the negative or whatever, negative space or the blank space, you know, like that kind of like, there's something about the flattening of it all. I think this is such an evocative piece about you. You know, like everything is like, I know it's like this facade, not a facade. That, you know, I think this is a great like primer for who you are, which is crazy and really interesting. So
yeah, and it kind of connects with the book pieces, because this would be like, well, I guess maybe you could like fold this and.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, totally.
And then yeah, these are like the references that I was talking about. And sometimes I get self-conscious about showing references because I'm like, oh, these are much nicer drawings than mine. Like I don't want like people to see this and then look at mine. But yeah, these are examples of like how rooms would be represented. Yeah, and I just like really I like diagrams and like ways that physical space gets coded in them.
Yeah, and organized.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, it just shows you your like own personal art history is like, you know, it's everyone should have their own art history, like version of art history, and you know, being this is like important because you know you're not like, you know, these minute things,
art or whatever, but
yeah, totally, sensibilities and stuff, you know what I mean. And it's like you're almost like adding to this lineage of this style of graphic work, you know. It's like you're like weirdly this like addition to that tradition that's like a kind of role playing in a certain sense of being an artist. You're like, I'm gonna like kind of like think about this as if I'm doing it, you know, for like this invisible person, you know. But then within that there's all these conceptual parameters you can bust down, and it's like then you are liberating yourself to kind of make that work, which is exciting.
Yeah, or it's kind of like reviving, like this is like a really dead art form, like architects would never ever
Mhm.
reuse this, it doesn't make any sense in like the way people read images now.
Yeah, and rooted in drawing, right? It's like rooted in this tradition
Yeah.
of drawing, which is like drawing as a tool for so many. Obviously, architecture is related to art, but you know, still, it's like kind of this
No,
expansive definition of drawing.
yeah. And then what's the next one? I don't know what, I mean, oh yeah, okay.
Oh.
Then this is like part of this series of these vertical building facades. And then I guess recently, like early 2021, I started inserting like storefronts into the bottom floor, just because it would bring in like a different type of space. Like you have like the domestic space in the upper floors and then this commercial storefront in the bottom. And I also just like love window designs, and it was also a way to incorporate text with like the store name. This one's called like Bonadrag, which is like slang for nice clothes.
Uh-huh.
And then this is an earlier piece of a similar facade, but much smaller scale. I think it was from 2019 and it was for a group show, but it's kind of like, oh, it's like my first use of a lot of these elements, like the drain pipe I like, because it's like this visual pun where it's like 3D in this flat drawing, or like this like trompe l'oeil kind of trick.
Yeah.
Where you see like the shadow at the bottom, like, oh, it's jutting out. Or like, I really like doorbells and like peepholes and locks and like things that suggest privacy or like designates you being on the outside as a viewer, like door knockers. And I'm really into like the buzzers, like as a detail. And then I also included this because I had pretty detailed progress photos of it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. These are fantastic. And this is like even like seeing how you cut it down. And I mean, I love it. It's so exciting. It's so cool.
So yeah, how do I do it? I usually start with like a loose line drawing, and then I really have to like highly render like a section of it just so I can get a sense of where the drawing is going. So that's where you see like on the left, like the top half is pretty well shaded, just so I can get a sense of like, oh, are these like shapes and forms really working? And then you can see underneath it are like all my reference photos.
Yes.
And then, yeah, and then I use a piece of glassine to protect the paper from my hand. And then on the right, that's like the next step where now I'm rendering like the lamp. And then when I have most of this first layer done, I start cutting out the windows. So the black that you see behind those windows are just my tabletop surface. So that's like the second step.
I actually love the shadows, like yeah, that shadow, like on those two top windows, like that kind of like glob is like so making it so much depth. It's like really amazing.
Yeah, and it's like you can just get like a much harder edge than if I had to like shade between all the lines and stuff.
Yeah, totally, definitely.
And then yeah, how else can I describe this? I wonder if I can use my cursor. Oh yeah, so like the curtain is funny. Like the curtains are a separate element and they're like pasted on top of this negative space. So then it creates this like little bit of depth. Like if you see it in person, it's like so subtle, and I don't know. I can never tell if it's legible in photos. And then yeah, must be like when the piece is. This must be a close up of when the piece is finished, because at the end I'll use like ink pen to do these like little contrasts. Like formally, my goal is always to do like the biggest range of lights to darks to really I don't know, make it pop, since it's all black and white. And then you can see these like little white dots, and that's I use like flash paint or acrylic to do these like tiny highlights, and that also just helps the drawing get I don't know, something your eye just like reads it, so it's not all just like this mid-tone gray. If you just have like a couple white,
like some grisaille or something.
Yeah. Okay, so that hopefully that gives like some illustration of how they're made, because it's always hard to like, I don't know, just verbalize it.
Yeah.
And then this is another piece in the Aldrich show that is also like, I made like 3 total of these vertical facades. So this one's like a butcher shop. because I wanted like objects that were like very easily legible by their form. So like there's some sausage and some steaks. And then like a pun, like fine cuts. I don't know, maybe it's too cutesy, but
No, it's cool. It's and then the figure like above, like looking like, you know, it's like you don't know how big the floors are. Like
like on first glance, it's like, wow, everything's like high finish and highly rendered. And then you like look closer and then all the proportions are off, or like
yeah.
this door is like slightly too small for the building, but
Yeah. And the person is like too small, which is really kind
yeah.
of weird and it's cool.
Yeah. But I don't know, I feel like that's what keeps it out of being like a straightforward architectural drawing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, and that's a close-up.
I feel like the fine cuts and like the bone and drag, that's like sort of like part of like that's like you, like your humor, like as you know, removed from your art, you have a kind of like, you know,
you're dry or something.
Yeah, dry. And it's kind of like it might take people a minute to get it, but like that's like, you know, that's very Milano in a way. It's really funny. I think, you know, it's like mature and it's funny, but it can also evade people if they're, you know, not.
I don't know. I appreciate stupid jokes more than like really.
Yeah, totally.
And then yeah, all the meats are like cut to shape.
Oh yeah.
And then they're like collaged onto this black negative space.
I feel like even like that vignette of the window, is kind of like when we like those earlier zine spreads. I feel like, you know, we're still, you know, you're not that far from whatever, like 10, you know, 7 years ago or whatever. It's like there's still like this organization of like, I know there's still like a reoccurring kind of setup and composition, you know, and
yeah.
I think that's like always throughout all this, you know, and especially like just like the window alone, you know, it's like that's straight from the earlier zine.
Yeah. Also, like my compositions, I'll openly admit they're not very complicated. Like they're very flat, often symmetrical.
Yeah.
Not the most correct linear perspective.
Yeah.
What else? But I don't know. Works for me.
Yeah.
And then this is one of my favorite LA window displays. Unfortunately, the business closed, but it was like an architectural salvage place in Hollywood, and they had these like amazing windows where it would just be like the surreal setup of like, you know, molding segments, and then like these fireplaces, and yeah, they would just be kind of like floating at weird angles, and they'd change it like every couple months. But yeah, I always loved their windows.
And there's like some like faux marble behind it too or something.
Yeah.
That's really cool. It's such a good touch. It's so nice.
They would do like fake paintings of fires in the mantelpiece. It's like very weird artistic choices. I don't know why they put gravel at the bottom. Yeah.
That's amazing. It's such a weird touch. Oh yeah.
These are by, I did a studio visit with this artist in New York, Natalie Lerner, and she brought up this artist with me. His name is Gene Moore, and he did the window displays for Tiffany Jewelers. And so this is one of his designs, but I really love them. And a lot of the documentation of his windows are in black and white. So they're pretty helpful. Like they're like almost like miniature theater sets, because, you know, he's working within the shallow space of the window, but it has to be like kind of illusionistic. And then he's working at this like reduced scale, but like visually it looks like very proportional and almost to life. And yeah, I love how they look in photos in black and white. He was like very skilled at lighting. So yeah, they are like a influence, even if my drawings don't look
as fantastical as this even, but
yeah. And this is another one. I love all the curtains. I think this is all like silverware and stuff. And then I think the next couple are maybe your installation. Oh yeah. And then I thought that would be like a good transition of these curtains and this like kind of spectacle-y stage window dressing to like the next two are like these stage drawings that you did.
Yeah.
Also did like the floor perspective.
Yeah, totally. Oh my God, I was gonna say the checker, the sort of, yeah.
I mean, I just
organize it.
do that now, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. This was like a drawing, kind of a collage drawing of like of a particular British TV music show, and I was like this band The Fall. I'd done this drawing for a publication, and um yeah, it's kind of just like those photos before. There's like there's something like this is like not like correct probably in terms of the proportion, but like because of like the way like the checkerboard floor is or whatever, it kind of allows like to make the drum kit look a certain size, like the keyboard, etc. Um, so yeah. And this actually, yeah, this drum kit's actually cut out and pasted on to this paper, which is kind of
Well, I guess kind of there's a little, oh yeah, now I can see it, but no, I mean, it looks like it's all part of the same.
yeah.
Yeah, this one says like a lot of depth to it.
Yeah, so
It just feels like a room.
yeah, that's cool. I kind of was hoping it would feel like before the performance began, perhaps, or like just like like a couple hours after. You know what I mean? So, um, yeah, and this is like a really direct, like it's like fan art basically, kind of I think of the like, stage and yeah, and in some way it's kind of like all these elements I feel like I'm always kind of rendering or using in real life for certain things in the past for performances and stuff. So this drawing kind of like was a way to, especially during the pandemic, to sort of like bring all that stuff into like into my small space or whatever, like live events, fantasy spaces, etc. And then also like technical drawing aspects, you know what I mean? So and like shallow depth and again like using a couple things to give that kind of depth.
Yeah,
It's kind of funny that photographer, there's something there like similarly like kind of like the looking into something and then it goes further back, I guess, you know. It's kind of cool.
so is this pretty faithful to like the photo that you're drawing?
I think actually I had to this was like from some video stills from like 1985 of some footage of this band The Fall, which I think we both would consider to be inspiring. And I think I actually had to like take multiple screenshots, which again I kind of like hate using a digital image because you have to kind of like, or it's like you kind of can't see things, but that can also be beneficial because I kind of had to like take out a bunch of stuff to like make it really minimal, and then had to kind of like composite a bunch of different screenshots and just be like, okay, like what can I like parse out to make, like I don't even know if the stage, it's supposed to be kind of like circular, so I think from the screenshots I had taken off YouTube, I was like, okay, like how can I get like justify this drawing from the actual space? So it's kind of like if you probably saw the photos, you'd be like, what is that? You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a little bit of like both, I guess, you know, a little of all those things. And I think though probably like literally when I look at this, like I think like the perspective is the most like just like that weird kind of like is maybe the most like
I
factual.
feel like it just makes sense, and I kind of just feel like you don't have to like, strictly follow visual logic. Like sometimes if it works for if the final drawing.
Yeah, totally. Like just what you were saying earlier about like proportion, you know, and I think that's what drawing can conjure, especially. Drawing, you can get away with it and you can be really good at it and it's fine, and you can not be good at it and it's fine, or you can be really good at it. But I think with painting, that can be, for instance, painting, maybe it can be a little harder to get away with that, I feel like, because you kind of have to fill in all of like the volume, you know, and with line, you can kind of be more, you can emphasize and like be like not, it can be more shallow. So,
Yeah.
and also like parsing out like you're like I love the door knockers, like, you know, and you like the doorbells, and I'm kind of like, oh, I love like this weird, like I think it's like a candle I had sort of thought, you know, and I'm like I think it was a candle on like a weird pedestal on the side of the stage, and like I kind of was like really into that. And then it's like, okay, the mic, I love microphones the way they look, so I was like, okay, I'm really gonna emphasize that, and like the way that the weird like angle of like the PA, like that weird shape, I'm like, okay, like I'm gonna like if I make those look just realistic, like everything else can kind of be, you know.
Yeah, they're like the anchor points.
Yeah, totally.
That's better than having like everything being high def, or I don't know.
Yeah, totally. And like perhaps if I worked on it for like another day, it would be different. But sometimes you're like, you just stop. They're like, okay, this is enough.
Yeah.
This is enough. And because then the viewer, like, again, like as fan art, the viewer can kind of fill it in. I think again, I can almost see like the people participating in this band together, maybe just from this alone. So I kind of thought that's like where I was able to like end it, I guess, you know, or something. So, but I think the technical aspects are from like the small details that I'm like, I'm really interested in these things. I'm like, that's all I'm gonna do or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's a balance between like having just enough like technique or finesse to carry out the drawing, but not being like so much where it's like suffocated and like
Hmm.
kills the life out of it.
Yeah,
It's a
totally.
very abstract way to talk about it, but
No, totally. Yeah, I think that's really easy to understand. And I think also if I had been there in real life and I had the opportunity, it would be a totally different drawing. It might be probably more sort of detailed in some way, or there'd be like, or maybe I'd only focus on one thing. But since it's like this composite of photos, I kind of end up using my imagination.
Mhm.
So that's kind of fun. That's one
Yeah.
part about it, I think. So yeah.
Oh yeah, and this is like another, I was trying to read, it's like something design.
Oh, yeah, I think this is like from 2019, I think, and it says character design, and then it says bed set, and then this is actually a drawing from like memory of
Oh wow.
my friend's apartment. He has this like really small 1-bedroom apartment, and I was designing these paintings this paint that was going to go on those open doors actually, and I was just like trying to like kind of get into like, I was like, how am I gonna design this painting for his door? So I started with a drawing of his space just to be like, what does his space look like? And then of course the background is like very much conjured, like all this drapery was just like me having fun, but
Okay.
he does have a bed like that with like these doors. And he actually has this interesting collection of art. Like he has like all these Paul Cadmuses on the walls.
Wow.
And so I was like really taken, and I was like, oh, this is a fun challenge to give him this like painting that would meet if you close the doors on the inside.
Mhm.
So when you open it, it was like two sides of the painting. So, but like it kind of started with this like rendering of his room. But then I think on its own, it kind of looks like to me like this sort of like setting for like a backdrop of like, or a background of like a whatever, some situation maybe.
Yeah.
And it can kind of go on. So I think when I look at this drawing, I think of like, oh yeah, for the future, like, oh, this is a great idea for like a sort of screen painting, or even like a space performance. My whole idea would be to take his doors out of his apartment. He's actually moving out of his apartment. It's like in 24th Street in Manhattan, and he's like, I'm moving. He's like, do you want to take the doors with you? Because I'm showing you these paintings. So I was like, that would be fun. So like the drawing kind of is like, oh yeah, maybe one day I could use doors in a certain way, and like I can sort of justify that because his drawing as a study for that idea down the line. And then I also am like, yeah, rendering the bed and like the sort of the sheets, like those technical things are kind of like, that's like where it all comes together, I think.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you rendered it instead of just taking a photo. I feel like most people just take a photo or.
Yeah, I guess like you were talking about earlier, like this like no for drawing photos. I feel like oftentimes it'll be more meaningful when I kind of conjure it again. Because then yeah, and like
it works a different part of your brain, and I think you does something where it sets it into your memory more. Like that's why taking notes by hand is there's supposed to be like studies where it's way more effective than just like typing it out or recording.
Exactly. Like you write it down and then you read it and then you write it down and then you repeat it in your head. So it's kind of like how I think about it. It's like reading a book.
Physical action.
Yeah, exactly. And so like even though these proportions are not like for the doorway, it's like, oh, I felt like so much more comfortable being like, well, like do I like the paintings on the door? Do I just like the doorway? And I want to like spend some time with that doorway for whatever reason, and like then I was able to inject like this more fantastical backdrop into it,
Yeah.
I mean, he had these checkerboard sheets, which was cool. So it kind of was like, oh, right. Like, I don't even have to like imagine that it was there. So I'm like, oh, I know he has checkerboard sheets, etc. So it's sort of like that. And I think like my hand, like the way I draw, like quote unquote stylistically, like when I draw like from life or from imagination, it's like a little more like there's more of like a freeness. Whereas a photo, I almost end up being like too attached to it maybe in a way.
Yeah. No, that's true. Where like the goal becomes different, where like if you have a clear reference, it's like how to faithfully recreate it in order, or like render it in order to make a successful drawing, versus like having I don't know, somehow if you don't draw that way, you have like more freedom to edit or
yeah, totally, exactly. Should we should we do maybe one more shot from your show and then we should probably wrap it up, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Or actually, well, this is your installation at 14A, I think.
This was in Hamburg, and this is kind of maybe the beginning of me thinking about like the idea of like merging like painting with like these like performance events I would put together. So this is kind of like, I was able to design this painting
That's so
for
cool.
the space. So like, you could walk through it, which is really fun. So this is kind of like an early theatrical painting design, I guess. And I was able to like shove in all this things inside of it, like all this, like the drawing and the painting, and then like the sort of architectural kind of shaped, like it's kind of like a sort of kind of like a virus on the wall in a weird way, the way it kind of like goes around it. But then it's also like people at the opening, people were like hanging out, and it was like, it was, the painting was there, but it was like kind of the backdrop too. So people are more like comfortable. And I don't know, I kind of like that. The painting is sort of like important, but it's also really the vehicle to get people to come together or something. So I kind of like that. That's what this served the purpose.
Yeah. So like they gave you like the measurements of the space, and then in New York, you like came up with this canvas shape.
Yeah, exactly, and designed it. And again, I was like, I need the measurements and like do these drawings to kind of go that way. And then it's kind of like, yeah, so exactly.
Let me see. I think there's just like a handful of slides left. But yeah, and then I just thought that was like resonated with this kind of column, like colonnade shape of like openings and then structure, opening, structure, and then.
This horizontalness, right? There's like kind of horizontalness, I think, in your work in general, even though there's a vertical, but like these horizontal pictures are so are weird. And so, you know, we always think about vertical in contemporary art, or like vertical.
Yeah, I think the default for artwork.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's like 2 drawings in the show that have a similar structure and shape. And then, oh yeah, and then this is a installation photo from the 2020 show at Bel Ami here in Los Angeles. I just included it because of like the curtain, and it was just like
the curtain, it's classic
work. And then just like, I feel like installation photos can help evoke a show more.
Yeah.
And then this is installation view from the Aldrich, the screening room that has the 2 3-dimensional works. And then the wall on that's the grayish wall, we did like a wallpaper covering that uses the same fabric as the book cloth, so that there's like a little mirroring, and just to make it feel cozier. And then we did spotlighting to also just direct your focus around the room. And also like it also brings up like staging and theatricality and all of those elements. And then this is an overall shot of the main installation in the Aldrich, which is like a much bigger space and has natural light coming in and like really tall ceilings. Yeah, and there was no like installation interventions. It was just like a straight hanging of all of the artworks. So yeah, I felt really lucky to have like both rooms where you could have one that was like a more traditional institutional show, and then another one where you could like try gesture and see if it worked. And then this is like a shot of the wall of the piece that's on the furthest wall that you saw in the previous show, previous image. And it's like this large facade, and it almost like combines all of the elements of all the drawings that you've seen, like the windows, the cutouts, the curtains, the doors, the basements. And yeah, here I was like trying to come up with, since the drawings are so flat, to come up with ways to like introduce more like 3D elements. So you have like the bay windows that kind of pop out. I feel like it could like work more with shadowing to like really make it pop. And then you have like this building that's kind of like 2 jutting out elements, and then one that's like slightly recessed. And so yeah, maybe I think that's the last slide. Yeah, that is. Okay, so should I stop the screen share in that case?
Oh, yeah, you can leave it up too. Thank you so much, Milano and Nick. An hour flies by.
No, we need more time. People
right. And you both were so right about the fact that you can talk for hours about this. And I was very much blown away by how what's missing in both your works is really so loud, right? Like each of you have things that you don't include, but that speaks a lot to the work. So that was really interesting to see throughout. Well, I don't think we have a lot of time for questions, but if anyone has questions for Milano or Nick, please share them with me at aldridge.edu@thealdridge.org, and we will pass it forward and share that. But thank you so much again, Milano and Nick. It was wonderful to hear from both of you.
Oh, thanks for hosting. This was yeah, really just great conversation to have.
Yeah, total honor to be among both of you. So thank you. And Milano, of course, thanks for everything, for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to continue.
And thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great evening.
Watched.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.